So friends, a very good morning. My name is Dhanunjay Reddy, and today we are going to continue our discussion on the role of caste in Indian politics. This is the third lecture in this series of identity politics. So today what we are going to discuss is we are going to discuss the politics of OBC and Dalit politics in India. First thing first, let me explain what is the inputs that I am going to take or from where I have taken the inputs for today's discussion. It is on three books. One is the book of Mr. Yogendra Yadav. He has written a book called Making Sense of Indian Democracy. And in this, he has clearly explained how Indian politics has developed over a period of time. Particularly, he has given the concept of first democratic upsurge and the second democratic upsurge. In my last class also, I have said what is first democratic upsurge and second democratic upsurge. The first democratic upsurge in Indian politics has happened in 1967 when OBCs has come out of the Congress, and the second democratic upsurge has happened in the year 19. Uh, it has happened in the year of 1990s, where Dalit has come out of the Indian politics. So that was a case of discussion. So this is a book. In this book, Mr. Yogendra Yadav has given this concept of first democratic upsurge and second democratic upsurge. And the other books is of the Mark Galanter. He has written a wonderful piece on OBC's politics in India that is called The Competing Equalities, Law and Backwardness in India. Law and the backward classes in India. So in this, he clearly explains how OBCs has risen over a period of time, what are OBCs in Indian politics, and what is their role in Indian politics. So that is what he has discussed. And there is one more book which was written by Ajay Bose. This is the biography of Miss Mayawati, that is titled as Behenji. In this book, Mr. Rajiv Bush he clearly explains what are the factors for the rise of BSP in Uttar Pradesh and what are the factors which made Mayawati to become a successful leader for the implementation of Ambedkar's idea of institutional politics. And he has also explained what are the reasons for Mayawati to get defeated over a period of time, that is after her tenure of 2007. So these are the three books from which I have taken the content today, and I have also added some more aspects from our regular books. So this is OBC politics in India and Dalit politics in India. The book of Mark Galanter, the book of Mr. Yogendra Yadav, and the book of Mr. Ajay Bose. So first thing first, let me quickly rewind what we have discussed so far in this identity politics. In my first class, I said what is identity politics, what are the pros of identity politics, and what are the cons of identity politics, and what is the way forward of identity politics. So the first identity politics in India is about caste. I said what is caste, what is the meaning, what are the sociological construct of caste, and then the debate of Louis Dumont versus M.N. Srinivasan. In this, I discussed about the concept of class versus caste. And then there is one more aspect that I discussed, that is history of caste politics in India, in which I discussed that caste politics is not a very new thing to India. We have seen caste-based alliances right from our ancient time to the modern times, and then we have seen how caste has been interlinked or it has been increasing its role in post-independent India. Again, I have discussed in my last class itself on what is the role of caste in Indian politics, and then I have discussed what is the positive role that it has played and what is the negative role, caste as a weakening force. So now today we are going to discuss the rest of the things that is of caste in Indian politics, that is OBC politics, Dalit politics, and caste as a determinant of electoral behavior. Finally, I will also discuss what is the role of rise of OBCs and Dalits and the demise of Indian National Congress as such. So this would be our point of discussion. So OBC politics in India. So who are OBCs? If you go by Manusmriti, The castes which come in the category of Sudras are now called as other backward classes. So Manusmriti has classified people or the Indians into four castes, that is Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudras. The persons who are belonging to Sudras are today called as OBCs. So this is first point. OBCs are intermediate classes today in Indian politics or in India. Next, in the constitution, they are described as OBCs, and this distinguishes them from scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Let us make it very clear that the Constitution of India has clearly defined who are OBCs, and it has clearly defined who are the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. So in the Constitution, they has described as OBCs, and it distinguishes from OBCs from other classes. The most important factor in Indian politics of OBCs is because of the strength of their numeric, because of the strength or because of their numerical strength. So because of the dominance in their population, they make a vital factor in the electoral politics of India. So they carry a very prominent role in Indian politics. The reason being their numerical strength. As we discussed in our first class about M.N. Srinivasan concept of dominant caste. Dominant caste is that caste which are numerically powerful. So they are numerically powerful. They are having this economic power. They are having equally social power these days. So the increasing influence of OBCs is described as mandalization of Indian politics. The reason for for calling OBC politics as mandalization of Indian politics is it is only after the Mandal Commission and the recommendations that was made by Mandal Commission that these people has gained more prominence after, though the first starting point of their prominence is the Green Revolution. So OBC politics and demands, they revolve around reservations, hike in minimum support prices for agriculture, etc. Today, if you look at the farmers' protest that is happening across the country, this is mainly carried out by the farmers of belonging to this particular caste that is called OBCs. So again, they fight for reservations. So 1990s mandalization of politics is the fight for the reservation systems. So OBC politics in India, OBCs as a caste, they belong to the Sudras in Manusmriti, and today they have more prominence because of their numerical strength, and constitution clearly defines them and separates them from scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. The role of OBCs in Indian politics is called mandalization of politics, and then OBC politics, they revolve around the rise of reservation systems and the rise of MSPs. So, as I said, Mark Galanter views on OBCs in India. This was the book which was written, Competing Equalities by Mark Galanter. Mark Galanter, in his book, he clearly suggested that OBC is a very loose concept and it keeps on changing. OBCs represent a large number of intermediate castes. Primarily, they are of peasants, farmers, cultivators, and artisans. So this is a very loose term, and it includes almost all the middle class population of India. They represent peasants, farmers, cultivators, artisans, and at some place they also represent the workers of industries. They are internally differentiated, which means that their status is also internally differentiated. Some are very high in their status in OBCs, and some are very low in their status. That may be economical status, that may be social status, or that may be the political status. So internal differentiation of the population of OBCs is very clearly visible, and that is the reason like constitution provides one aspect called creamy layer in OBCs. So they are internally differentiated. The status of some is very more with respect to the scheduled caste. But if you compare with scheduled caste, their status is more. Some of the population of OBCs is very more. So this is what the point is about Mark Galanter, Competing Inequalities. He clearly explained about OBCs. OBCs is a very loose conception, and it keeps on changing, and it includes all the middle class population. Continuing with the discussion, he also said that some powerful OBCs in India are Yadava community, the Kurimis, the Jats, the Gujjars, the Reddis, the Okaligas, the Patels, and the Marathas, etc. So these are the various intermediate castes or ODS, other backward classes which are present in India. Now OBCs are the most important force. They have domiciles in all fields. They have their expertise in all fields. They entered into almost each and every domain of human activity in the country. So they are a very, very important force per se from the perspective of workforce or per se from the perspective of the other forces. They are landowners and they are in political power. Most of the chief ministers in most of the states in India, they are also from the OBCs and they are representing the administrative system. So OBCs have a very, very clear and a very prominent role in Indian politics because they were clearly defined about who are OBCs. They have that power called political power, social power, and they have economic power, and they act as a force and they represent in almost each and every domain of Indian working system. As a result, OBCs form a formidable force not only in politics but in other sectors of Indian sphere. So history of OBC politics in India, if you look how OBCs got associated themselves with in India, then Christopher Jeffrold in his book The Silent Revolution, he has given a clear explanation on the rise of OBC politics. And in this book, he has clearly said how OBCs of Northern India and the OBCs of Southern India, how they differ and what is their difference, which differentiates the North OBCs from the South OBCs. So he explained the situation in South. As far as the situation in South is considered, in South, OBCs are more dominant. They were very dominant in the South because OBC politics is much older and much more mature compared to North India. So many of us think that it is in North India that OBCs are prominent, but that is a wrong conception. It is in the Southern India that OBCs are more prominent, they were more predominant, and the OBC politics were at a very a mature stage compared to the northern OBCs. The composition of the society in South is different compared to the composition of society in the North. In South, the only caste, upper caste, is the Brahmins. If you look at the composition of society of the South, then the only dominant caste or the only prominent caste, upper caste in the South it was Brahmins right from the ancient times. Majority of the population are belonging to the other backward classes. Maybe it may be the Reddis, maybe it may be Kammas, Kapus, everyone. They were the other backward classes. As a result, there is only one upper caste that is called Brahmins, and their number was very low. It was very easy for the other backward classes to challenge them numerically, particularly when India became a democratic republic. In South, along with that, in South, leaders like Jyotiba Phule, through his organization called Satya Sodhak Samaj, E.V. Ramaswamy Nayakar, through his movement of self-respect, Sri Narayan Guru, Sri Narayana Dharma Paripalana Yoga, and they were very successful in strengthening the consciousness of OBCs. What do I mean by this? Leaders of OBCs are present quite from a very, very long time in the South. But if you look at North, we'll come to that. We don't find leaders of this maturity or of this capability in the North. So in South, OBCs had a very strong leadership right from the very early days. Because of the numerical strength, Brahmins were not in a position to counter the challenge of the numerically strong OBCs in the South. In South, ethnicization also took place. What do I mean by ethnicization? It is the assertion of Dravidian identity over the Aryan identity. If you look at the history, Aryans or Brahmins considered themselves as a descendants of Aryans, but this was quite challenged by the southern India, particularly the Tamil Nadu, and they said that we belong to Dravidian identity, we are not belonging to the Aryan race. And this ethnicization has reduced the dominance of Brahmins, the upper caste. As a result, OBCs started gaining more traction in the south compared to the north. So if you look why in the south OBCs were very, very predominant, Mr. Christopher Jeffrold, he clearly says that OBCs were very, very mature, they were very older, their presence is very older in Indian politics, and they were very dominant because their society is very different compared to the north. Their composition of the society is different because the only upper caste in south is Brahmins. As a result, they are very, very numerically less in number compared to other backward classes. Also, the role of leaders cannot be forgotten in this context, and because of the numerical strength, the role of leaders and the ethnicization that took place in South, OBCs consolidated themselves from a very long period of time, unlike the North. But if you go and see how it is in the North, OBCs in the North, they are not quite mature. They were they entered into Indian politics at a very late stage. The reasons for that is in North, movements like Arya Samaj, Shuddhi Samaj, or that is Shuddhi movement, they have been a greater influence on Vedic religion. If you look at this Arya Samaj Shuddhi movement, they were the movements which were focused on revival of Brahmanism. As a result, Brahmins continued their dominance in the north because of this movements. The second thing is in north there are more than one upper caste. This is not just Brahmins, but they had more upper caste. As a result, it was not very easy for the backward classes to counter. The reason is the more the number of upper caste, the more will be their numerical strength. The more their numerical strength is, obviously it becomes very difficult to counter the numerically strong upper caste. Further, in north, backward classes went for Sanskritization. In my last class, in my first class on this discussion, I said what is Sanskritization? M.N. Srinivas has given this term. And because of this Sanskritization, Brahmanism continued. What do I mean by Sanskritization? It is the lower sections trying to follow the ideals of the upper caste, such as learning the Sanskrit, learning the Vedas, reciting the mantras, as was done by Brahmins. What it made the OBCs, rather than transforming themselves, they transformed themselves into upper caste. As a result, the upper caste became more dominant. So Sanskritization is one factor which led for the late arrival of OBCs in northern India. Instead of autonomous parties like the Dravida Kajaha, which was in the north, in the south, OBCs remained a part of Congress for a very long period of time. As a result, the hegemony of Brahmanism or the hegemony of Indian National Congress with more number of Brahmins was quite visible in north. So in south, people organized themselves into other parties such as Dravida Kajaham and other parties. But in the north, rather than forming a separate political party or separate political entity, OBCs continue to be a part of Indian National Congress or the Congress party. So as a result, they had lost their relevance in Congress. It was only after 1960s that OBCs realized their power and they started entering or forming their own political entities. Hence, there is a late arrival of OBCs in the political scene or the political scenario in the north as an autonomous force. So these are the differences which Christopher Jeffrold clearly says. OBC politics in the north versus OBC politics in the south. OBC politics in the south as such is a very, very mature one, but in the north, OBCs arrived at a very later phase. The reasons being well described. The movements is one reason, and the numerical strength because of more than one upper caste and the systematization that OBCs took themselves, and they were a part of Congress and they didn't consider themselves as a separate political entity for a very long period of time. So it was a very late arrival of OBCs in Indian politics. Now we will see what is the role that OBCs played in India. There was one scholar called Satish Deshpande, and he has written an article that is the OBC primer in Indian politics. In this article, you can just read this article. It is a very beautiful article. You can find it in the Indian Express also. Satish Deshpande, in his article, The OBC Primer of Indian Politics, he suggests that Indian politics is to be read and interpreted with reference to the direction of OBC politics in India. What does this mean? Indian politics cannot be understood without understanding the way OBCs are modeling their politics. So OBCs play a very crucial role in determining the direction of Indian politics. OBC politics is the heart of Indian politics. Why it is the heart? Because of their numerical strength. 42% of the population, which means around 500 million of the population, are OBCs. Hence, they are strategically unavoidable in a democratic republic. In a democracy, it is the numerical strength which is going to determine the politics, or which is going to determine the fate of the parties. As a result, strategically, they cannot be avoided. They are going to present in any alliance which the national parties are making or which the state parties are making. They are strategically unavoidable, and they form the heart of Indian politics. So this was his explanation. Further states that state politics is nothing but OBC politics. If you look at the state politics of India, 90% of the 90% or 99% of the Indian state politics are revolving around the OBC politics. The arrival of coalition government at the union marks the influence of OBCs at the national level. Because in the year 1987, the first coalition government started coming, though in the year 1978 and 79, for a short period of time, there was one coalition, but particularly after 1980s or 1987s, the coalition government at the center remarked, or it has forged the idea of OBC politics in India, or it has shown the strength of or influence of OBCs on national level. OBCs as such are thick of the caste. It means they are going to determine the future of caste politics in India. If you want to have caste-free India, then it is OBCs which are going to determine caste-free India. Or if you want to continue, or if India has to continue with a caste system, then definitely it is OBCs who are going to determine whether caste system should be continued or whether caste system can be overcome in India. So OBCs form a thick of the caste. So in future, they are the determinants of caste as such. Whatever the decision that you are going to take on caste, it is going to get influenced by OBCs. Because if the government comes out with a system called removal of reservation for other backward classes, then definitely it has to be accepted by the other backward classes, being a determinant force. Otherwise, it is not going to happen. So we have to see how far it is going to work and how they are going to move in the coming days. Whether caste will be prominent or it will get diluted, it all depends upon the choices that is going to be made by the OBCs. This was a very beautiful article again, Mr. Satish Deshpande's article, and he clearly explains all this. So the OBC primer of Indian politics, they are at a very primer position in Indian politics, and Indian politics is directed in the direction that OBCs are moving. So this is about OBCs. Let us look at the Dalit politicization or the Dalit politics in India. Dalit mobilization in India goes back to pre-independent era or the pre-independent times. It is not a very new phenomena again. Dalits has been a part of Indian national movement. Dalits has played a very crucial role in the freedom struggle, and even today Dalits are playing a very, very crucial role in Indian political system. It is the assertion of Dalits against the exploitation of the upper caste or caste Hindus, upper caste Hindus, which means it is in pre-independent times you can find Dalit organizations as an associations asserting themselves to free from the exploitation that is caused by the upper caste Hindus. So Dalit politics has arisen in the exploitative tendencies of the upper caste, and they started organizing themselves as a separate political entity, which has become more prominent in the late 1990s in Indian scenario. The biggest contribution towards the politicization of Dalits has been because of one man, that is Dr. Ambedkar. Ambedkar is the tallest personality for Dalits, and he is the person who has institutionalized the Dalit politics in India with his well-versed education system and with his great concepts. So, whenever we speak about Dalits are an outcome of exploitation for centuries. As a result, they had only three options for their upliftment. If you want to uplift, if a Dalit man or a woman wants to get uplifted for themselves, then there are only three choices which are available to them. One is they have to go for co-option, or they go for autonomy, or they go for radicalization. So there are only three things which are available for Dalit empowerment or Dalit upliftment in India. They have to either go for co-option, they have to go for autonomy, or they have to go for radicalization. We will look what do you mean by co-option. Dalits to remain within the Congress, that is, they have to continue their dominance by being within the Congress system and continuing their presence. So this is called co-option. They are co-opting with a political party which has dominance at the national level. It may be the Congress or it may be today the BJP. So Dalits has to remain. If they go on choosing to be a part of certain bigger entity, then that is called co-option. Then they can exert pressure at this party and they can get some concessions. For example, leaders like Babu Jagjeevan Ram preferred co-option, right? This is one thing that you can observe. At present, there is a rightward shift of Dalits from the Congress system. This means because this man, Ram Vilas Paswan and Udit Raj, they clearly understood that Congress system is decreasing day by day. As a result, there is no relevance for co-opting with Congress. If you want to have certain political gains or if you want to have certain political concessions for Dalits, then the only available option for Dalits is to move towards a rising party, that is the right-wing party or the NDA party. They believe that annihilation of caste is one thing where the Dalit politics were focused at. Then these leaders they thought that if you want to annihilate the caste system, then it would be just an utopian concept. Annihilation of caste is not possible. Annihilation of caste is a concept given by Karl Marx. By violent revolution, you have to annihilate caste. That was the idea of Karl Marx. But these people they clearly believe that in a democratic country, revolution cannot be possible, and annihilation of caste cannot be possible. It would be an utopian idea. Hence, if you want to gain certain tangible benefits, it is better to work with major parties and then gain some political concessions. This was the idea of Dalits or the Dalit leaders over a period of time. So either go for co-option, that may be with the National Congress, or that may be with the NDA government of the center, thereby get some tangible benefits to the party and thereby emancipate yourself from the exploitative nature of the other caste. The second option that is available for the upliftment of Dalits is autonomy. This was the approach preferred by Dr. Ambedkar. But what is the provisions that Ambedkar has provided for establishing autonomy to the Dalits? Ambedkar preferred constitutional approach. That is, by using the provisions of constitution, you form into a separate political entity and then come to the government, form the government, and then show your dominance. That is what the autonomy means. Don't co-opt with anyone, have your own approach. But Dalit should be an autonomous force. Dalits as an autonomous force can be realized only through this constitutional approach as per Dr. Ambedkar. This approach was quite successful because it was represented by Kanshi Ram, a person in Uttar Pradesh who has founded the Bahujan Samajwadi Party. So, autonomous force is not an utopian idea, rather, it was very, very practical and it was implemented in many parts of the country. with the rise of a leader called Kanshiram in Uttar Pradesh, who founded the Bahujan Samajwadi Party. The slogan of Bahujan Samajwadi Party was Baba Tera Kam Adhura, Kanshiram Karega Pura. So he gave a popular slogan. Mr. Kanshiram has given a popular slogan saying that Ambedkar's your dream is very very far and I am going to fulfill your dream. Baba Tera Kam Adhura and Kanshiram Karega Pura. So this was the idea with which BSP was implemented as BSP has come into existence. Now, if you look at the symbol of BSP, BSP represents a blue flag with elephant. The blue flag with elephant is a symbol of the blue flag with elephant is the symbol of Dalit politics or BSP. What does this indicate? Blue flag represents the blue sky and elephant represents the numerical strength. So what do Kanshiram mean by this? He means that in a very large country, the numerical strength is of Bahujan Samajwadi Party. So he represented this system like under the blue sky, it was the elephant, which is which is very huge animal. So was like that the numerical strength of the Dalits is very more in India. So they had this concept of blue flag and they had this slogan. Then Mayawati has been a prime example of the success of Ambedkar's approach. Though the party of BSP was founded by Mr. Kanshiram couldn't form the political government. Rather, it was his successor of BSP, that is Ms. Mayawati, who has played a very crucial role in ensuring that Dalits came to the ruling position. So she was very successful in implementing Ambedkar's approach of autonomy. And Ajay Bose, in his book Behenji, a political biography of Mayawati, he has suggested that Mayawati could successfully implement Ambedkar's approach. After 3 short stints, she tried for 3 tenures, but it was quite unsuccessful in the beginning. However, she was successful in her 4th attempt, that is in 2007. She had a comfortable majority. If you look at this point of time, as per Ajay Bose, Mayawati has done successful social engineering by forming alliances with Brahmins. So this was the system which Mayawati has followed. So Mayawati has took the help of Brahmins and she has come out to form the government. This was one vital thing that we have to observe. What do this mean? Dalits forming alliances with Brahmins is one thing which represents the democracy in true sense. That is, it represents the true social mobilization which has been not present in India since a very long time. But Mayawati's coming into force or coming into power is one new paradigm in Indian politics because it truly represents the upsurge of Indian democracy, and that is the reason why Mr. Yogendra Yadav calls it as the second democratic upsurge. However, later on she suffered from megalomania, which means one thinks very great for himself or herself, and delusions. The moment she has gained power, she didn't think about the people for whom she has formed a political party. Rather, she started being aloof to the Dalits themselves. As a reason, it was after 2014, you see a clear demise of Mayawati and Dalits getting associated or co-opting with leaders like Narendra Modi and Amit Shah or the Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister. At present, she has been reduced to the leaders of Jatwas only. So she represents today only the leaders of Jatwas. Jatwas are OBCs in Uttar Pradesh. The sections of Dalit leadership is autonomous force. This is on decline. So recently, yesterday or day before yesterday, she has come out with a new direction for 2021 state elections of Uttar Pradesh. So she gave certain directions to the party saying that we have to form the political party. We have to see in the coming days because in 2022 there is Uttar Pradesh elections. We have to see how far this force is going to determine the politics of Bahujan Samajwadi Party or the politics of autonomous force of Dalits. But clearly, post 2007 or post 2014, this autonomous force of Dalits was a very in severe decline. The reason being the approach of Mayawati once she has come to power. So this is what Ajay Ghosh has clearly said. Ajay Ghosh clearly explained the reasons for the rise of Mayawati and the reasons for the decline of Mayawati's regime. So this was the second choice which was available to the Dalits for their upliftment. That is the force of autonomy. If you look at the third thing, that is called radicalism. There is also one choice which is available for the Dalits for their upliftment, that is by a revolution or by radical means. Radicalism among Dalits was inspired from the Marxist idea of struggle and revolution. So by following the revolutionary means, Dalits were having an option to emancipate themselves. They were inspired by a movement called the Black Panther movement in USA. So in USA, there was one movement called the Black Panther movement. So they started replicating the same thing because they got disappointed with the politics of co-option, and certain sections of Dalit leaders formed into Dalit Panthers in the similar way of Black Panthers. So Black Panthers movement, it was a racial movement against the whites. So blacks fought against whites through these Black Panthers. Similarly, they thought that we should form Dalit Panthers and we should fight as co-option is not working. The leaders of this section includes Namdev, Dashal, Raja Dhel, and J.V. Power. So these are the three leaders: J.V. Power, Raja Dhal, and Namdev Dashal. So these people, they started forming themselves into Dalit Panthers and exercising radical forms of Dalit upliftment measures. Dalit Panthers aimed to counter particularly the Shiva Sena or the upper caste in upper caste parties in Maharashtra. So they started asserting themselves against the Shiva Sena. However, as I said, radicalism or Marx's concept of idea of revolution couldn't sustain in a democratic country. The movement could not continue because of the same leaders like Namdev Dashal co-opted for Congress. They realized that radicalism is quite not possible. The only way or the only pragmatic way for the upliftment or to get some tangible benefits to the sections of Dalits is by co-opting with the Congress party or with the right-wing party. So in recent years, there is a revival of radicalism. This was observed by Mr. Pratap Banu Mehta, and he clearly says that the revolution of Elgar Parishad or the Bhim army led by Chandrasekhar Azad, who is known as Ravana today. That is, Chandrasekhar Azad himself calls himself as Ravana. So he said that he is leading this movement called Bhim army or the Elgar Parishad. So they are exercising this radical form of upliftment again. So if you look, this radical upliftment for the Dalits is on the rise and the autonomous force is on the decline, or people are just co-opting. Co-option is one thing which was available, but today if you look at the Dalit movement, Dalits are moving towards radicalism again under the leadership of the Elgar Parishad. However, it has to be very clearly understood that Ambedkar was against this system of radicalism. Ambedkar is a person who believed in the institutional approach, in the power of the institutions for the emancipation of any sections of the community. That is the reason Ambedkar never opposed or never said revolution is the way. Ambedkar said that democracy is the way. It is only through democracy that any section of community can get uplifted for themselves. But in practicality, it has been not possible because they continue this radical form. As a result, they continue this radical form of upliftment. So continuing with our discussion, that is the analysis of Dalit politics in India. If we have an analysis, this was done by the Pratap Banu Mehta. I used to say the same thing. Pratap Banu Mehta has given a new article titled The New Dalit Challenge. In this article, he has written this after the Bhima Koregaon incident, which happened way back in 2018. In this, Pratap Banu Mehta clearly says that the new generation of Dalit politics is reflecting a profound change. They are not following their ancestors, or they are not following their preceders. Rather, they are setting a new example for the Dalit community in the coming days. That is, there is rise in radical form of Dalit assertion. The youth of today Dalits, they were no more satisfied with winning constitutional recognition. That is, they are not after constitutional recognition, rather they are also rejecting managerial approach. What do I mean by this managerial approach? Like some parties such as Congress or the BJP, they give some managerial positions for certain sections of leaders in the Dalits so that to suppress the movement. Today they are rejecting this managerial approach. They want a complete emancipation of the emancipation from the exploitative tendencies, and they wanted to form a separate political entity, and this was quite visible in the Bhima Koregaon incident. Just go through this Bhima Koregaon incident in any book or in any newspaper. You can find how the Dalit perception has been changing. Dalits are building a counter hegemony today. They believe that, as per census 2011, Dalits form 16%, more than 16% of Indian population. As a result, they believe that yes, we can form a formidable alliance if we are together. And they started countering the hegemony that used to exist. They are going beyond the politics of survival. Today, it is not just about the politics of survival, but today they are focusing entirely on the politics of the emancipation. They are challenging history, they are rewriting the history, and they are taking more antagonistic postures. For example, in the Bhima Koregaon incident, they used the terms like, rather than using the terms like we won, they gave the slogan of that you were defeated. So they were saying that rather than in Bhima Koregaon is one incident which has happened in pre-independent era or during the time of colonial rule, where Dalits in association with the British defeated the upper caste Marathas in a place called Koregaon. As a result, this was known as Bhima Koregaon incident, and so far until 2018, Dalits used to think that okay, we won over the upper caste, but recently they changed their position and they started calling that Marathas were defeated, and they started reflecting. This reflects that they were asserting more antagonistic posture. According to Pratap Banu Mehta, he clearly said that the pressure of new Dalit imagination is colliding against the upper caste strategy of containment. So, upper caste is trying for containment politics, because today upper caste is getting very weak because of the rise of OBCs on one hand and because of the Dalits on the other hand. So upper caste always wanted to contain the Dalits by giving some posts or by giving some remunerative positions. But today they were quite asserting pressure and they are colliding directly against this upper caste strategy of containment. According to C.P. Bhamri, it is very good that consciousness is increasing among the Dalits. It is a very good thing that consciousness is increasing because it can act as an empowerment, or it can act as a base for empowering the weaker sections of the community. But he clearly says that Dalits should make alliances with the progressive forces, and they should come out of this radical movement. Otherwise, they will limit the scope of their own struggle. That was the point of Dalit politics in India. That is, C.P. Bombay clearly says that this is the vital need of the day. They cannot go for radicalism in a country like India. Rather, they have to get aligned themselves with progressive forces. They should form some coalition force, and then they can exercise more power, or they can exercise more tangible benefits, as was done by some autonomous forces uh, in the Dalit section itself. So I have given the meaning of managerial post also. It creates a class of beneficiaries to exhaust the question of social justice and diffuse the conflict. Whenever a conflict is rising, then they take few people who are rising the conflict inside the sections, and they give some monetary benefits or some managerial post, and then they suppress the movement. So this was a technique which was used by the upper caste for many years to suppress the movement. But today, the young Dalits, they were not in a position to accept the so-called managerial post. Rather, they want complete emancipation. As a result, they were more radicalized. But C.P. Bhamre clearly says that it is a very good thing to see that the rise of Dalits, but they should have to go with progressive forces. Otherwise, they are going to make irrelevance for themselves. So, making Dalit speaker or president. So this is one example, best example for managerial position. If you look at the election of president of India, and they propagated either it is Congress or either it is BJP at the time of election of Mr. Covid, Mr. Ramnath Covid. They clearly said that he belongs to this scheduled caste and we are representing our scheduled caste leader. This is a very unfortunate incident that even the post of president, that is the first citizen of India, post is also casticized by the so-called dominant parties in India, whether it is similar, either it is Congress or either it is BJP, both have casticized this post of president, and it is a very unfortunate thing. This is called managerial post, analysis of Dalit politics. And if you look at the impact of OBCs and Dalits in India on the Congress system particularly, the rise of Bahujan Samajwadi Party has impacted the fortunes of Congress in a very big way. Because until 1967, until the arrival of Green Revolution, OBCs were forming a formidable alliance in the Congress. I just said in the north, OBCs were a part of Congress system. In the south, they had their own political entities. But for long, OBCs were associated with Congress. As a result, Congress could continue its force in Indian powers. So Congress dominant system or Congress system has been supported by rise of has been supported by OBCs for a very period of time. But the rise of Bahujan Samajwadi Party has made OBCs to come out of Congress, and they started aligning themselves on BSP lines. As a result, this was the first major blow to the Congress. Further, the Dalit vote bank consolidation, the Dalit consciousness has made the Dalits to come out of a Congress over a period of time by 1990s. This was the second blow for Congress over a period of time. And then Muslim vote bank also got divided. If you look at the Congress Party is nothing but a party of minorities, particularly belonging to Dalits, particularly belonging to other backward classes, and particularly the Muslim population. But today, if you look, Dalits coming out of OBC Congress and OBCs coming out of Congress is the major blows. And today, Muslim community also got divided, and they are also forming alliances with BJP in some areas. Or they are also coming and exercising their option as an autonomous force. So today, minorities are moving away from Congress. As a result, Congress was at a very least position in Indian politics today. Congress has lost its entire base because even Muslims left the Congress for other parties or they started forming their own parties. Though still Congress represents major chunk of Muslim population or Muslim voters, votes of other minorities such as Christians. So today, if you look at Congress system was quite reduced to that of certain sections of Muslims or certain sections of Christians, but the majority base of OBCs and Dalits, Congress clearly lost. As a result, Congress needs to work on certain other strategies to counter build the narrative of National Democratic Alliance or the NDA government at the center. Now, I have discussed the role of OBCs, the role of Dalits, and how it has impacted the Congress system, and what was the major role that OBCs and Dalits has in Indian politics. It is very vital to understand, because if you want to understand Indian politics cannot be understood without understanding the politics of 65% of Indian population. Around 45% are Dalit OBCs, around 16 to 18% are SCs, around 9 to 10% they were SCs. So if you are neglecting this section, then definitely we cannot understand the Indian politics. So caste, particularly the OBCs and Dalits, are very important in order to understand the Indian politics. Now, how caste is becoming a determinant for electoral behavior of Indians. So Indians, whenever they are exercising their vote, they are casting their caste rather than casting their vote. So caste, some scholars say that caste has been a prominent role, playing a very prominent role in the electoral behavior. Some say that caste role is declining in Indian politics, but let us also look at the latest trends. Caste as a determinant of electoral behavior. Voting provides an opportunity to caste to assert their influence. So voting is one political equal right which was given to all the sections of community. And by voting, any section, if they are numerically strong, they can assert their influence and they can ensure that policies are being made in their favor. So voting is one thing which gives the real power to the numerically strong caste. Either it may be Dalits, either it may be OBCs, or either it may be any other group which has numerically strong entities. So voting as such is a very, very vital thing for the community. Scholars like Rajni Kothari, Lindsay Gardner, Miller, K. Campbell, and Norman Palmer, they have studied the role of caste in Indian politics. Just remember few names. Rajni Kothari you can remember, Miller you can remember, Key, Campbell. They have studied Norman Palmer. You remember these names. They have clearly studied how caste is becoming or caste has become a dominant factor in determining the electoral behavior. According to Rudolph and Rudolph, we discussed in our first class itself or second class, Rudolph and Rudolph, caste association has given caste a very new identity to play in Indian democracy. Caste has a very great impact in Indian democracy. I discussed this already that Rudolph has given a concept of social mobilization, traditionalization of modernity, and modernization of tradition, which really reflects the democratic process that has happened in India. As a result, it gave new vitality to the so-called Indian democracy. Indian democracy got its relevance or it got its vibrancy through these caste systems. Now, scholars who support caste as a determinant of electoral behavior. The first scholar is Abhijit Banerjee. Abhijit Banerjee, they said that in India, economic performance doesn't matter or the developmental politics doesn't matter for the people. Rather, people are driven by caste and religion. He was the Nobel winner in economics, but when he studied the political system of India, it is very clear to him that in India, people are not casting their vote, rather, they are voting their caste. But it has to be the developmental politics which should be guiding. But unfortunately, as per Abhijit Banerjee, it is not the thing which is happening. And as far as Christopher Jeffold is concerned, in his Silent Revolution, he has clearly said that though traditionally caste has become most important variable, yet the last two elections show some erosion in the role of caste. So Christopher Jeffold, he said that the role of caste in Indian politics has been a prominent one till 2014, but with the arrival of NDA at the National Front, then definitely the role of caste is declining as for Christopher Jeffold. However, as per Yogendra Yadav, voters in India are looking for identity and politics rather than looking at developmental politics. So they say that caste as such is playing a vital role because Yogendra Yadav said that people are looking for forming identities and forming identity politics rather than forming developmental politics. So they wanted to organize themselves, either it may be in the caste form, either it may be community form, either it may be in the religious form. So they are trying to look for new identities to gain the political power. This is one thing which caste is playing a vital role. So Professor Abhijit Banerjee is very clear that people are not interested in democratic in developmental politics, and Christopher Jeffold also carried the same view. However, he differs this from 2014. Yogendra Yadav still maintains the same thing, saying that in India, people are more worried about identity politics rather than developmental politics. And then there is one more person called Milan Vaishnav. Milan Vaishnav gives an alternative view. According to the study, Indian voters have challenged the conventional view. That is, conventional view means good economics, doesn't make good politics. So it was conventionally it was believed that good economics make good politics, but in India it was not visible. It has been held that parochialism, populism, patronage play the role in Indian elections. However, things are changing. So still, again, this man says that good economics is not going to form good politics. Even though from 1990s we have uh, realized the growth potential or the potential of our economy, and we have started showing tangible benefits on the economic front, particularly on the growth rate. But this growth rate or good economics is not represented in politics. Still, the parochialism, populism, and patronage to the caste system is continuing, but it is also quite changing two over the past two tenures of India government. Arvind Panagaria shows that economy matters. Arvind Panagaria was an economist and he was a right wing scholar. He said that economy matters in Indian politics, it is not just caste. He has given an example saying that the rise of BJP in 2014 is through not caste politics but for their focus on Vikas. People rejected the corruption system which was prevailing during the UPA 2 system, so they were fed up with these appeasement policies, they were fed up with the corruption policies, so they started voting for Vikas or they started focusing on developmental politics. In recent elections, BJP has created a new category, the category of economically weaker sections. If you look, economically weaker sections were given 10% reservation in uh, education and employment opportunities. Absolutely, this shows that caste system is not prominent or its role, the traditional caste role is declining. Particularly after the economically weaker section category has been created by the government, the caste system showed its decline because it was no more Dalits, it was no more OBCs who are getting the reservation system, but even the upper caste. But even the upper caste who are economically backward, they are getting reservations. By this approach, BJP wants to dilute the caste system and make developmental politics as their agenda. And particularly, people are also influenced by developmental agenda. As a result, BJP was able to successfully form governments at the central level for two times with an overwhelming majority. It has certainly diluted the role of caste, economically weaker sections, or reservations, and allowed the emergence of caste identities. Now, caste as a determinant of electoral behavior, we have to understand one more thing, that it is not just caste which is determining the electoral behavior. Though scholars, we just seen Abhijit Banerjee, we just seen Christopher Jeffrolt, Yogendra Yadav saying that caste has been playing a prominent role in Indian politics, and then this was countered by Vinal Vaishnav, and this man called Abhijit Banerjee, sorry, Arvind Panagaria countered them. However, it has to be understood, it is not just caste. So it should be understood that it is not only caste which is playing a very important role in determining the electoral behavior, but there are other factors such as the religion, the dynastic politics, which is shaping the voting behavior in India. For example, the recent elections shows that there is decline in the dynastic politics, but still religion is playing a crucial role in Indian politics. So Indian politics cannot be just understood from the or cannot be confined just to the caste. There are other identities which is playing crucial role. The rejection of dynastic politics was recently shown, but however, it is just an impression that it is being declining. But if you look at particularly the state politics or major of the national political leaders, even today in the parliament, they were from dynastic politics. The most unfortunate aspect, however, is the voting behavior in Indian politics is that they are not rejecting candidates with criminal antecedents. So people with criminal antecedents or criminal background, they are entering into Indian politics. As a result, this is one unfortunate thing that Indian voters are not considering. Politics in India has been based on caste in recent decades, but the rising middle class and increasing inequalities within the caste groups is paving a new way for class-based fault lines. So caste is getting itself disintegrated because there is clear differentiation, particularly the economic differentiation inside the caste system, or intra-caste economic differentiation and inter-caste differentiation is very, very prominent these days. As a result, caste itself is getting fault lines. So caste may pay path to another system, that is called the class system, that may be the economic class or the social class, which is going, particularly the economic class is going to determine in the coming days about the future of Indian politics. So let me quickly recap what we have discussed in this class. I said what is the role of OBCs politics in India. I said what is the role of Dalits in India and impact of OBCs and Dalits on Indian National Congress, and then caste as a determinant of Indian politics, where yes, there was a clear role of caste. Few scholars like Arvind Panigaria said no, caste started declining its role because of the economically backward class or the because policies of BJP. Nonetheless, it has to be understood that it is not only caste which is playing a prominent role in Indian politics, there is other aspects of identity which is still determining the Indian politics. But today, if we look at the Indian caste system definitely has created a major intra-caste differentiation in the form of economy. As a result, caste uh, caste differentiation is going to be a vital thing in the coming days, and certain forms of other identity can also be expected in the future. But one thing is, as per Arvind Panagaria, let us think that it is the Vikas project of the BJP, or if it is people are really moving towards development politics because of the education, because of the awareness that they are getting these days, then that is definitely a good thing, not only for the country, but for the entire citizens of the country, because it is going to bridge, or it is going to turn democracy to be truly democracy, and it is going to make India not just electoral democracy, but truly democracy in between the elections also. So this is what the discussion of caste is. This is what the role of caste in Indian politics is. In my next class, I'll be continuing with other identities such as religion and ethnicity in Indian politics. So far, have a good day.